All right, let's dive in. Today, we're looking at Theosophy, but from a really unique and, frankly, challenging angle. The source material we're drawing from doesn't see it as just another spiritual movement. No, it sees it as something far more deliberate, a targeted, metaphysical operation designed to completely reshape Western thought. So let's just start with the most provocative claim right out of the gate. This single sentence frames Theosophy not just as a collection of beliefs, but as an active rejection of a core concept in Western thought, the logos. In this context, the logos means a rational, divine order to the universe. And in Christianity specifically, it's the idea of God's word made flesh. This claim immediately sets the stage for a pretty profound conflict. And that's really the central question we're going to explore. To even begin to understand this argument, we have to break down what the logos actually represents here, and why its rejection is being framed not as some simple theological disagreement, but as a calculated, strategic operation. Our source material really frames this whole thing as a fundamental clash of worldviews, what it calls two competing metaphysical architectures. So let's break down exactly what those are. This slide lays out the fundamental conflict perfectly. On one side, you have the personal logos, a knowable God, the Word made flesh, which acts as a kind of anchor for big concepts like a fixed human nature and objective truth. Then, on the other side, Theosophy proposes an impersonal one, a distant, unknowable divinity that all individuality eventually just dissolves back into. According to this analysis, these two visions for reality are completely and totally incompatible. And this table shows you the nuts and bolts of the alleged operation. According to this analysis, Theosophy goes through and systematically inverts key Western pillars. So, divine incarnation, the idea of God becoming human, is replaced with self-deification, the human becoming a god. Divine revelation is replaced with esoteric gnosis, secret knowledge. And the whole idea of a stable human nature gets swapped out for a constantly evolving consciousness. Okay, so now that we've seen the alleged conflict, let's take a look at how this argument is built, using Theosophy's own core tenets as presented in our source material. A key concept you have to understand here is the Prisca theological. This is the theosophical idea that there was one original ancient theology, and that all the world's religions today are just different veils hiding this one single truth. Theosophy, then, positions itself as the key to uncovering it. And this follows directly from that last point, right? If there's some hidden, true divinity, then what about the personal God of the Abrahamic traditions that so many people know? Well, the source states that, from a theosophical point of view, that figure becomes a lesser being, maybe just a human creation or even a kind of barrier obscuring the real, unknowable absolute. This perspective really distills Theosophy's ultimate goal down to this: ancient temptation. The belief is that every single person contains a divine spark, a little piece of that impersonal God. So the spiritual journey isn't about worshiping some external deity. It's about accessing this divinity inside yourself and achieving a godlike state. Now, the source is really clear that these ideas didn't just pop up out of nowhere in the 19th century. It argues that Theosophy has a long and actually traceable intellectual lineage. So this timeline shows the family tree, so to speak, that's laid out in the source. It kicks off with Renaissance Hermeticism, which brought in ideas of humanity being a microcosm of the divine. This then flows into Rosicrucianism, with its goal of a sort of alchemical transformation of humanity. It then gets a huge boost from German idealism and American transcendentalism. Think of Emerson's Oversoul, before it all culminates in the big occult revival of the 19th century. So the crucial point here is that in this view, Helena Blavatsky wasn't really an inventor. She was more of a consolidator. The argument is that she, or maybe forces that were guiding her, took all these pre-existing esoteric streams and packaged them into a single coherent system, a metaphysics that could be easily exported all around the world. Okay, this is where the analysis really pivots from philosophy to strategy. The source claims that this newly packaged spirituality wasn't just for personal enlightenment, it was actually designed to be used. The source argues that Theosophy was operationalized, turned into a tool of soft power. It alleges these early connections to Russian and British intelligence, who supposedly saw spiritual movements as a clever way to influence political elites. The analysis then traces this influence forward, pointing to deep ties with Fabian socialist circles, the League of Nations, and eventually the UN. It even highlights specific examples like Robert Muller's World Core Curriculum and Alice Bailey's Lucis Trust, which, get this, is an organization that still holds consultative status at the UN today. So, what was the ultimate goal of all this? The analysis argues it was to create a universal spiritual framework, a kind of one-world religion. The main objective was to push aside traditional faiths, especially Christianity, and unite the world under a new, shared metaphysical system. And this brings us to the final section: why any of this actually matters. The source argues this isn't just some abstract philosophical debate. It's a conflict with profound, real-world consequences for Western civilization. The core warning is, well, it's stark. By removing the personal, incarnate logos as the ultimate anchor for truth and reality, the argument is that the very foundations of the West begin to crumble. And this slide lays out the chain of consequences as described in the analysis. It's like a domino effect. First, the logos is removed. Without that anchor, the philosophical basis for God-given inalienable rights just dissolves. That, in turn, erodes the concept of the unique sovereign individual, what we call personhood. And according to the source, when the value of the individual is weakened, the foundation for national sovereignty is the logical next thing to go. But why does this happen? The argument is actually pretty functional. An impersonal, unknowable one simply can't serve as a foundation for these core Western concepts. It can't grant rights because it's impersonal. It can't ground the unique value of a person because its ultimate goal is dissolution of the individual into the whole. And it just can't provide a stable, objective moral order. Which brings us to the alleged political endgame: a world of individuals with no inherent rights, with a weakened sense of personhood, and with no firm moral anchor. Well, that becomes the perfect environment for a centralized, technocratic, global governance system to rise. The argument is that the metaphysics paves the way for the politics. And that's where this analysis leaves us. It completely reframes Theosophy, moving it from the realm of personal belief squarely into the world of geopolitical strategy. It presents a provocative thesis and leaves us with a question: is Theosophy simply a spiritual path, or is it a political tool? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us.